Are we going to see very many hidden gems going forward?
The way that we kind of function nowadays is that, oh, a new thing comes out, awesome, play it for a week.
On to the next thing, yep.
So I do think that more modern games, like, sometimes just fall through the cracks. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Level Up Podcast. I'm your host, Murph, as always, with my good friend, Cal.
Hello, it's me, Cal. If you're watching, you can now see the light behind me. And it's defined.
If you're watching the video version, Cal redid his lighting a little bit. He's very proud of it. So please, even if you're on the podcast, the audio-only version of this, please let Cal know how proud you are of him in the comments section. He appreciates it, I'm sure. Anyway.
Murph, what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about video games, not lighting. What's our topic today?
Well, we're going to talk about something shiny like lighting. We're going to talk about hidden gems. Do you like my little transition? Woohoo, because gems, they can be shiny. Once again, if you are listening audio only, Cal is looking at me with a very disappointed face.
I'm really just selling out to the video podcast format. My bad, everyone. My bad. Yes, today we are talking about hidden gems. I think that's a term that's thrown around video game communities quite a bit, but especially when we're talking about older games, there maybe are quite a few of them. How do we define a hidden gem? What are some of our personal hidden gems? And does the idea of a hidden gem game, is it kind of overplayed now? And do hidden gem games kind of even exist anymore in like modern times? We're going to talk about all of it.
Yeah. So my definition of a hidden gem, we won't spend too much time on this before we dive into the games themselves, is a little bit subjective. I mean, a hidden gem is kind of like, is this a game that's the vast majority of intermediate to advanced people that play video games have not heard of?
Yeah, so obviously this, the hidden part, it's that, people don't know about it. The gem it's secretly actually a good game. The fun thing about hidden gems and where a lot of the conversation comes from is that I think where a lot of people disagree on these games is maybe the gem part, some kind of combination of, oh, people never really knew enough about this game for it to even get played widely enough in the first place. Or, maybe it's just something that spoke specifically to a certain amount of people that they love to call it a hidden gem, but a lot of people who maybe did interact with it were like, oh, this isn't great.
Exactly. I don't know about your list, but as far as mine goes, it's not every single one is a 10 out of 10 absolutely must play game.
Definitely not. No.
But they're all good
my
games.
List is not either. And this is, of course, the hidden gem is one step below the cult classic.
We're not making a tier list of hidden gems versus cult classics.
Tier listing every single potential rank of video game. Okay, let's get into our personal picks. Murph, why don't you start us off? What is your first favorite hidden gem game?
So the first one that I want to talk about today is Gladius for the GameCube, Xbox, and PlayStation 2. I have the GameCube version. I'm sure Cal very much appreciates that as a GameCube connoisseur.
Indeed. I love seeing a GameCube game winning.
Yes. I also love seeing LucasArts games. I miss LucasArts games, and this is an excellent one that is not based off of a Star Wars license, which is interesting, right? You don't see that super often. So this game is a kind of grid-based, it's a little Fire Emblem-y, turn-based RPG. You are a gladiator, or you have a bunch of gladiators that you all position on the battlefield. You move them around, and you make them fight each other. You get the adoration of the crowd, and that'll help you to win. It's just a really solid tactical RPG, I think is what they're called.
Yeah, tactical RPG is definitely the genre, and I think Fire Emblem is the best. Fire Emblem, maybe Triangle Strategy, Final Fantasy Advanced Tactics in the past, Tactics Ogre.
Oh yeah, Tactics.
Those are a lot of very similar type of, there's turns, you're on a grid, you care about height advantage, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
That kind of gameplay loop.
Yeah, and what was the board game that had like the hexes that we played together?
Oh, HeroScape.
HeroScape, yes.
HeroScape.
So I know that type of game is something that you actively enjoy in person. How do you feel about them in video game form?
Oh man, Final Fantasy Advanced Tactics 2 is one of my favorite video games of all time, Murph, but we'll save that for the Nintendo DS family of episodes. Don't you worry.
Yeah. So the thing I really like about Gladius is it's nothing like particularly special as far as concepts. It's just the execution is like ridiculously solid for what it is. So if you're a fan of these tactical turn-based RPGs and think the setting of gladiators fighting in an arena is neat and cool, then you're going to love this one.
And I think they did a really good job of fleshing out. This is the one game on Murph's list, spoiler, I've seen it, that I have played. And I have only played this game basically by happenstance because, family goes on down to the used video game store when I was in high school. And my youngest brother, Keegan, was like, all right, a game with a gladiator on it for the PS2 that costs like $4, I'm in.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he, who was like 12 at the time, saw no appeal in a tactics RPG game. He wanted to play some kind of,
like more real time.
Packed, some kind of like action 2D fighter, type of thing with gladiators. And, I got the chance to play it, and the rest is history. I think they did a really good job of kind of fleshing out the rest of the game, the stuff with, there's a lot of customization available. There are 2 entirely relatively unique like storylines for the 2 different people you can select to be at the beginning of the game. The storylines themselves are kind of whatever, but there are 2 completely unique independent ones. Building up that gladiator school, I think they did a really good job of building out a very solid game that also then, to your point, has some pretty solid like tactics RPG gameplay underneath of those other trappings.
I think it's pretty easy to learn, all things considered. So if you've looked at these types of games and thought, do I really want to dip my toe in it? I might suggest this as perhaps your first one. One other thing that I think this game does very well is multiplayer. You can play with multiple people, and you just kind of control different characters when it's your turn. So technically speaking, you're not all controlling people at the same time, but you get assigned which characters that you get to control, yada, yada. And so it is just very fun to strategize with somebody in the same room. And you can do it with up to 4 people. So it can be a great time.
Small footnote. Unfortunately, Gladius on the PlayStation 2 does not support the multi-tap, and the co-op multiplayer play does max out at unfortunately 2 players on the PlayStation 2. Ooh. So if you're looking to play with more than 2 people, like usual actually for this generation of games, just avoid the PS2 version of the game, buy the GameCube one or the Xbox One. It is in some strange way objectively worse on the PlayStation 2. That's a real recurring theme on the show, actually, at this point.
Yeah, we keep talking about games from this generation, and that just tends to be the case.
All right, I guess we can move on to my first game here. Strangely enough, a game that I actually played loads and loads and loads on the PS2 before I ended up playing it loads and loads and loads on the GameCube. Go figure. A rare hidden gem that is also a licensed game. This is James Bond 007 Nightfire. This is one of a glut of James Bond's games that they continue to pump out, after the success of GoldenEye. It wasn't made by Rare, if I recall correctly, obviously.
No, it was
not. No. But for what could seem like a very generic, you'd pass it by on the shelf and it'd just be like, oh, yep, that's a James Bond game. And it would be right next to the 3 other James Bond 007 games that they had released in the last 4 years, right? The story mode of this game, sure, whatever, it's if you have played James Bond, GoldenEye, if you have played any other James Bond, licensed game, and you have played the single player mode, then you have experienced what is on offer in the single player mode for James Bond 007 Nightfire. The part of the game that I think is specifically really good is
it the multiplayer?
It is the multiplayer, Murph. Mm-hmm. The multiplayer in this game feels so good. A lot of the maps are truly excellent. The gunplay, really fun in my opinion. There are a couple characters with unique functionalities, as is always the case in James Bond. Nightfire is a band Oddjob game as well.
Yeah, that's just kind of the case.
Yep. But you know, I like I said, as we said at the top of the show, these are a little bit of objective takes, but I have spent a lot of time playing a lot of different multiplayer, fun, local games in my time, especially within a specific band of console generations. And for whatever reason, Nightfire was one that we came to just like over and over and over again, even over like other local multiplayer, you know, face off against each other shooting games. Nightfire was the one that we always came back to with different groups of friends. And it wasn't just like me. It was like other people too. That's why I played it on the PS2 before I picked it up. I played it on my friend's PS2 a lot before I picked it up myself for the GameCube and introduced it to other people. And they kept choosing to come back to it. So
does it support the multi-tap on the PS2?
I think so. Yeah.
But you certainly didn't use it.
I hadn't thought about it, but I do recall playing it in my faulty memory of being, 11 or whatever. I do recall playing Nightfire with more than 2 people on the PS2. So I will tentatively and uninformedly say yes. Smurf, do you have any experience with Nightfire?
Yeah, I do.
Is this the one game on my list that you have played?
I do actually like this game quite a bit. It's definitely a more modern version of a 007 game compared to something like GoldenEye, because GoldenEye very much has that like clunky, they're just figuring things out.
Yeah,
really
it feels
sluggish.
like an early version.
Yeah,
of what
Nightfire definitely benefits from coming out after Halo 1.
Yes.
So that certainly is a mark in its favor. So if you like the James Bond IP, but you find GoldenEye like ridiculously clunky, I would say that this is probably your next best bet, because I think the missions are a lot more polished. I think the game's actually like quite gorgeous, especially on the Xbox.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Very good. And like you said, the multiplayer is just tons of fun. So yes, I basically echo everything that you said, is that this is a very good game and one of the better shooters for sure on the 6th generation of consoles. Is it a hidden gem? I think it's overlooked compared to, say, GoldenEye. Right, but I do see more and more people start to say, "Hey, remember Nightfire? Hey, remember Nightfire?"
No, I've been defeated in the marketplace of defining a hidden gem ideas.
Well, if anyone out there has not heard of Nightfire, well, maybe now's the time to see what you've been missing.
Yeah, it is a game I did specifically wanted to shout out, because I'm sure it is a game that has incidentally been overlooked by quite a few people just by the sake of it having the appearance of yet another one of millions of licensed games that were churned out during specific periods of, video game consoles' lifetimes.
Yeah. All right. Next hidden gem from my personal collection is a very interesting one. That is Auto Modelista.
I was going to say, I have never heard of this game, Murph. What is it? What's going on? There's a car on the cover. That's about what I know.
Yeah. This one is, yet again, another 6th generation console game. I promise not all of ours on the list are from that era.
Bad news about mine, buddy.
Ooh, maybe I'll have Calzar. It's okay. We can work through this. Anyway, this is one of, I believe, 2 racing games that Capcom has ever made ever. Like, Capcom just does not make racing games. Specifically, like, sim type, like, more realistic racing games. But this one is weird because it has a art style like Wind Waker or like Jet Set Radio, where it's cel shaded, it's super cartoony, and it's just not something that you really see in the world of racing games, especially from this era. Because I think like the more anime-ish aesthetic that this game goes for has become a lot more popular in recent years. but wasn't quite as popular during the early 2000s. So I think it got overlooked quite a bit in that regard. Now, there is a big downside with this game, and it is the fact that the game, while absolutely gorgeous and looks like the most cartoonishly ridiculous racer that you've ever played, actually handles like a sim racer, which you don't expect.
Yeah, I think when I think of basically any type of art style that is not attempting to be like relatively photorealistic graphics for whatever that would look like at the time, taking itself seriously, perhaps, I would not expect a sim racer. I would expect something much more akin to a Burnout, Need for Speed type of loosey-goosey, arcadey.
Yeah, floatier controls, perhaps a little bit more forgiving, but the controls are very not forgiving on this. And it threw me off quite a bit. And I've read online that anybody who experiences this game just kind of has to go through that hurdle of trying to figure out the handling of the game, because it is just, not what you expect. But once you do get past that, there is a fun game to be had in here. Like I said, art style is amazing. There's a good variety of cars. It's nothing like Gran Turismo or anything like that. Those are just ridiculous. They have like 500 cars.
Yes, so
that
many.
You can play as in the game, which, whatever. This clearly does not have that, but it does have fun races. And really, that's all I can ask for. I do wish the progression was a little bit more, I don't know, like there was more of it, because it feels like you go from 0 to 100 like pretty darn quick. So there's not a ton of meat to this game. Because one thing that I always look for in more sim type racers is you start at the bottom and you get your Toyota 86s or whatever to start with, or your Honda Civic hatchbacks, and then you work your way up slowly but surely, and then maybe you start getting into like, I don't know, the S14s, S15s, and then eventually you can make it to like those really awesome supercars.
You get that. Well, I was going to say the 911 turbos, but realistically, like the higher end of this stuff is like, oh, here's some weird McLaren project car, etc. Yeah.
So I want there to be like a specific curve to that so that it takes time, because I don't like it when racers give the high end cars to you all at once, because then it feels like there's nowhere to go.
Here's every single car. Okay, what am I supposed to do now? Just race?
Yeah. So it doesn't do that. The Auto Modelista does not do that.
Okay.
But the curve is a little bit more aggressive than I would like. I wish there was a little bit more, it was a little bit more slow paced and there's a little bit more content. So those are the two big negatives, and those are negatives that I can definitely understand people having a hard time getting over. But if those don't particularly bother you, this game's a blast.
I feel like racing games in general are pretty slick, pretty awesome, much like Auto Modelista. And it has like some kind of cool, interesting thing going on.
Yeah, and even if they don't, there's probably a lot out there that are just like kind of solid, and this one is that and looks pretty cool.
What else could you want?
Yeah,
perhaps it to be a little more arcadey, and maybe there to be a better like unlocking curve.
Yeah, but you can't have everything.
Yes, indeed. Speaking of not having everything, we don't have all the time in the world, so let's move on to my second topic.
That was a good segue.
My second game. Again, maybe hard to call a hidden gem, but I'm really zooming. I'm trying to zoom in and focus on where people wouldn't think of like what is good in the game itself. Maybe I'm going for more like hidden gem game modes inside of these games. I'm realizing this in real time. And I have picked another licensed game that very easily could have been overlooked if you didn't know what was going on. Not looking for a very specific thing to begin with. WWE Smackdown vs. Raw 2006.
Ooh, wrestling.
Yes, a wrestling game, and another genre of game that, just like James Bond, much like racing games in general, there are so many wrestling games, especially from like the late N64 through like early PS3 360 generation. They were really pumping these things out annually, and they are, or even above annually, and they are back to pumping them out annually now. But
But that was more like the heyday of wrestling, right?
Yes.
Like you're a lot more into wrestling than I am ever was.
Gotta have my athletic soap, gotta watch my athletic soap. Definitely a heyday of wrestling. There's been like several different heydays of wrestling. Another one of which we're currently kind of right in the middle of, which is kind of cool.
That's awesome.
WWE SmackDown versus Raw 2006. Why specifically 2006 when there are so many other WWE SmackDown versus Raw titles to choose from? Easy.
It's the one you own.
No, it is the best version of the My GM mode, far and away. What's
the My GM mode?
Yeah, so in WWE games, obviously, a lot of what people think of what you could do in them, and this is what a lot of people do in them as the main gameplay mode, is like, you pick your favorite wrestler and you pick what kind of match what you want to do, and then you beat the crap out of each other and someone pins the other person. That is the main gameplay you can do. The My GM mode, pulls back the curtain a little bit on, what wrestling really is, which is just like scripted entertainment, right?
Wrestling's fake?
Yeah, wrestling's fake.
I kid.
Yeah, exactly. Scripted entertainment that, much like any other TV show, is just purporting to be something that it is not. Blah, 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 blah. In the My GM mode, yes. Exactly. In the My GM mode, you are like the creative director of one of the 3 WWE shows, SmackDown, Raw, or ECW. And so you have a budget, you have a certain amount of money, and then you have to like sign. There's like a draft at the beginning, and then there's free agents. Cool. And you sign what wrestlers you want on your shows, and all of the different wrestlers kind of have like popularity rankings and how good they are at wrestling and blah, 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 blah. And then every week you have to book your show, and you have like a certain amount of match slots, and you say, okay, this wrestler and this wrestler and this wrestler are going to have a 3-way ladder match, and that's going to cost such amount of money, and that's going to, lower their stamina, and they're at a higher chance of getting injured, and blah, 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 blah. And then
a ladder match, is that where they smack each other with ladders?
Yeah, they smack each other with ladders. And,
sick.
Yeah, exactly. Hit each other with ladders, and oftentimes there's like some kind of thing they have to like grab by climbing up a ladder to actually win the match. But you just over and over again, you have to manage the morale of your different employees, and it's kind of like franchise modes from Madden and other sports games, if you're familiar with those. Just your franchise is a WWE brand that you are managing, and then at the end of every week, after you have locked in your show, your 2 opponents are the other 2 brands of WWE. If you're Raw, it's going to be like SmackDown and ECW, and the game is like, oh, I'm going to crunch all these numbers behind the scenes that you can kind of learn and figure out. And you gained this many fans this week, and you made this much money this week, but your opponents gained this many fans this week and got this much money. And so you play like a year worth of weeks, and then at the end of the year, whichever brand has the most fans wins. That's the game mode. Cool, fun to do by yourself. Where it gets really interesting and really cool, in my opinion, is 100% local multiplayer friendly.
Yeah.
In that a different person can control each of the 3 different brands, and you just take turns each booking your shows like sequentially, and then it spits out how you're doing. And you can have a lot of fun with other people who are into this kind of specific fantasy booking is the term of wrestlers, and thinking about how you would make your own matches, all that kind of stuff. Even if you're not into wrestling, it is kind of like a very cool type of like resource management and business simulation type of game mode, much akin to, like I said, the very popular franchise modes in Madden, NBA 2K, etc., etc. So I just wanted to shout out WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2006 as a hidden gem, thanks to its subverting its licensed beat 'em up nature, hiding a very deep, very cool game mode with inside of itself that is, in my opinion, very sick.
And the like actual like core gameplay, like the mechanics of like how your characters fight each other and everything, like is also like good and solid.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This was also kind of the peak of when these games, like a lot of those mechanics, were at their best, kind of around. There's peaks and valleys. Like specific N64 games people love. This kind of 2006 through 2008 of the SmackDown versus Raw series, that kind of stuff. Yeah, those mechanics are just solid too.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that you alluded to those specific portions of time for wrestling games, because my next hidden gem is also a wrestling game. So,
wait, you like wrestling?
I know nothing about wrestling except for what I've experienced with this game, and that is WrestleMania 2000 for the Nintendo 64. So, yeah, I just assume that everybody has like The Rock has super polygonal face. I assumed that's just what all the people look like in real life, just like N64 character models. But the reason that I like this one is primarily because it's the only one that I own. What? I know a lot of people love No Mercy, and I have played No Mercy once. That's the one that came out after this. And it is also pretty fun, but it chugs a little bit more. Like, the frame rate isn't quite as good. And I'm sure it has more features, but this game has basically everything that I'm looking for in an N64 era wrestling game, which is to say a ton of stuff. So it lets you pick any character from this era. It lets you customize any character from this era. You can put pants from one person onto another person, all sorts of fun stuff. They all have like their finisher moves. They all have like special finisher moves, which I'm assuming is a thing that people do in wrestling. Is that a thing that people do in wrestling?
Yeah, a great majority of wrestlers kind of have like their big moves that they hit, and that's what is supposed to end the match.
Okay, yeah, so you can do all of those.
Yes.
Again, I'm just like speculating and guessing here. This is all I have understood about wrestling up to this point. But yeah, like, for whatever reason, you can fight outside of the ring. Is that a thing in wrestling that people do?
Yeah, it is.
Why have the ring then?
Well, Murph, in a normal match, you can only be outside of the ring to the count of 10, or else you will be disqualified.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, they have all sorts of excellent modes. They have modes, not exactly like career manager or anything, but it's not really that good, but just like tournament modes, stuff like that. Plenty of like fun little missions and mini games, and a really, really great multiplayer experience on the Nintendo 64, which this is definitely one that I pull out whenever we're having a party or something and people are just kind of sick of the Mario Kart and the Mario Party of the world and just want to like smack each other, because that's what this game is great for. And I do think that it is a legitimately good game because it is pretty simple to pick up and play. Like, there's only 2 buttons that you realistically need to know to start doing the thing. You have your grapple, and then you have your punch. And then you start to learn, oh, I have a strong grapple and a weak grapple. I have a weak punch and a strong punch if you hold the buttons. And then you can start, like, messing around with bouncing off of the walls of the arena and running around. And then you can use, like, the control stick in the middle to do, like, those super cool finisher moves and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's just really, really neat and really fun.
Sounds like a very good time to me.
Yeah.
I've never gotten to play WrestleMania 2000. I have played WWF No Mercy, which is like you said, the classic N64 wrestling title.
Yeah. I believe this one is also a little cheaper than No Mercy on the secondary market, so that also has that going for it.
I do know one funny wrestling related piece of information about this game, which is that despite being called WWF WrestleMania 2000, which is ostensibly, the name of WrestleMania 16, it was branded as WrestleMania 2000.
Wait, what's WrestleMania 16?
WrestleMania 16 is the 16th WrestleMania. WrestleMania is a pay-per-view. Yeah, it's a huge pay-per-view event that wrestling has every year. It's
it's a pay-per-view mode in this game.
Yeah, classic.
It's very cute.
The pay-per-views are kind of like the key attractions of wrestling. It's where a lot of the storylines end, and it's where the biggest matches are. The biggest of the big pay-per-view every year is WrestleMania. So WWF WrestleMania 2000 is supposed to be about WrestleMania 2000 for whatever reason. But obviously it's like, there's nothing in the game about WrestleMania 2000 at all. So much so that the set, the main set featured in the game, the stage design that you see, is from the 1999 event WrestleMania 15.
Oh. That's funny.
Because it was released like months prior to the actual WrestleMania 2000. Yeah.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
Why would you?
I don't. It probably to make people go, ooh, WrestleMania, and the year is 2000.
I get promoting it, but don't you want to like try to tie those together a little bit more closely to promote it? I don't know. That's just me.
I guess anyway, so. I don't know.
Wrestling, probably very cool. This game, very fun.
All right, that's enough wrestling conversation for one video games podcast.
Honestly, you have probably doubled my amount of like wrestling knowledge just in this one video.
in this one video.
Yeah.
I know you said, what's WrestleMania? And I was like, oh no.
I know it's this game, but that's about it. It says, oh, whoa, it says WWF for like the logo for WrestleMania. Maybe it's called WWF WrestleMania 2000.
It is called WWF WrestleMania 2000.
Well, I learned another new thing today.
There you go, WWF. WWE before it was before it was named that.
That I did know.
Yeah, before they were sued by the World Wildlife Federation.
I did know that because I'm like, why are they called WWF sometimes and WWE other times? So I looked that up. I do know that.
Yep. Okay, let's go on to my third hidden gem game here. And this one is kind of a complete tonal shift from the shooting of James Bond Nightfire and the beating the crap out of each other WWE Smackdown versus Raw. It is Harvest Moon, A Wonderful Life.
The best Christmas movie game.
I'll just read you the back of the box. Let's get the vibes here. The biggest harvest ever.
Whoa.
Farming lasts a lifetime in Forget-Me-Not Valley, a coastal village where you cultivate friendships and raise a family among crops and livestock. Make important choices as you marry, start a family, grow produce, and guide your offspring through life's most challenging chapters. What sort of life will you live?
Probably a good one. A cool one where you raise a lot of sheep and cattle.
Yes.
Yeah, I know Harvest Moon.
Yes, exactly. I was just laughing thinking about what I'm going to say about this game in a moment. So, Harvest Moon, A Wonderful Life. It is, if you are familiar with the Harvest Moon series of games, or as they are known in Japan, the Story of Seasons series of video games.
And which they are known as now for all future releases.
Yes, before the publisher like stole it's a whole deal.
It's a whole mess.
Harvest Moon games in the US are not real, quote-unquote, Harvest Moon games, blah, 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 anymore. However, Harvest Moon, A Wonderful Life is a real Harvest Moon game made by Marvelous Interactive in Japan. And so, therefore, I'm allowed to like it. So, Harvest Moon, A Wonderful Life, it is a very laid-back game. It is a slow game. It is a game that makes you confront the highs and lows and slowness of being a farmer in the middle of nowhere. I think this game is magical. You just get a very rundown farm, and there's time. You walk around the town, get to know all of these people out in the middle of nowhere. Slowly make money, starting off with your 5 turnips, and eventually you have 3 huge fields full of crops, and you have a barn full of wonderful animals, and you have a whole setup, and you have simply befriended every single person in town. Of course, this is a genre of game that has exploded in popularity over the last several years. I mean, it's been a while now, pretty much ever since the release of Stardew Valley. this genre of farming simulation plus relationship games.
Harvest Moon is like the OG Stardew Valley.
Yeah, Harvest Moon is quite literally the OG Stardew Valley, or I guess rather Story of Seasons is the OG Stardew Valley, going all the way back to like the Nintendo 64 and original Game Boy. But I think for people who enjoy that kind of genre of game, and I'm not even someone who enjoys that genre of game that much. I have enjoyed my time in Stardew Valley as well, but Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life, I think, is just extremely overlooked in that it is a very solid, very well put together farming simulation game. Great characters, great gameplay. It's got all of the trappings of the genre, but in a really good way. It's all really put together. And why it has all the trappings of the genre is because, kind of like you alluded to, this game in specific, A Wonderful Life, kind of, the time it came out, the 6th generation, when so many games and series were kind of taking that next jump into what they could be compared to what they were. Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life really set the farming game genre off in a really fresh and new direction. But a lot of people simply don't know that because it is a underappreciated, not played that much game from long ago, long before this genre became anywhere near as popular as it is now. So anyone who is into the genre of farming games, I would heavily recommend it. And I have it here on the GameCube. I've owned it for a very long time on the GameCube. I have bad news. If you're going to buy this game and play it, you should play A Wonderful Life Special Edition on the PlayStation 2.
Oh, PlayStation 2 version's better?
The PlayStation 2 version just has more content in it. It's like a special edition.
Just because it has more content doesn't make it better. It's like Resident Evil 4.
It's the same game, but they added in stuff. And I think this genre of game is kind of the game that does benefit from
more content. Yeah.
More content. Yep.
Yeah. So what specifically do you think is special about this game compared to like the Stardew Valley or other games of this era that were like similarly slower paced, like say Animal Crossing, which I know a lot of people love on the GameCube? Like what do you find draws you to this game?
What I find really draws me to about this game, I think, is kind of twofold. I think it is kind of hard to compare it to the crowning achievement of the genre of Stardew Valley.
Sure.
If anything, I think something I do actually appreciate about it, more to what you were saying about more content. If anything, something I appreciate about it in specific compared to Stardew Valley is that it just has less stuff in it. There is less stuff you can do. It has a narrower focus. Stardew Valley is like a really quite in-depth relationships game with a really quite in-depth farming stuff, and then really quite in-depth like other systems as well. This game, you're farming, you're chilling, you're hanging out, and you're chatting up people every day. And yeah, you can give them gifts and stuff, much like you can in more modern versions of this game.
Yep.
I think I had both this game and Animal Crossing like at the same time in my life on the GameCube. And I think what really drew me to this game more than other kind of like cozy games that existed at the time was there is kind of more of just, even though it is like a cozy game, there is just like an extremely strong sense of like progression that does come from just like I think like the capitalistic aspects of the game of like, I am growing crops and I am going to get those crops back in a couple days, and I know I'm going to make this much money, and I know what I'm going to do with that money is I'm going to get a better watering can. And now that I have this better watering can, I can get more vegetables. And once there's like always kind of like a constant slow, but like a constant thud of progress and very defined goals and all that kind of stuff that you can set for yourself, and you'll be like, all right, I'm going to save up $8,000 and I'm going to buy the auto milker because I don't want to milk my cows, all 6 of my cows every single day. And that kind of like slow expansion progress that you could like plan for and schedule out and all that kind of stuff was just like really appealing for me to some reason. And that's not like a hallmark of the genre, but the relatively greatly small genre that exists. But it all just really speaks to me, Murph. And I think more people should experience it.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people have had issues with things like Animal Crossing where they say, hey, it doesn't really give you like super defined goals. Like you were saying, something like Harvest Moon gives you. It's like pay off your house.
Yeah, it's like
maybe
pay
complete
off
the
your
museum
house,
collection, but you don't get a reward for it or anything. Yeah.
How do you make a lot of money? I don't know.
Figure it out.
Need a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do appreciate games like this. Oh, one fun story. So my sister's boyfriend, he played Back to Nature for the PS1 way back in the day when he was a kid. And so he texted me like a month ago and was like, I really want to play this game. I want to play Harvest Moon Back to Nature. What's the best way to do it? And I was like, all right, well, it's a PS1 game. You can buy a PS1, but if you're going to get a PS1, might as well just get a PS2. Grab a disc, memory card, controller. You can get it for like $150, maybe something like that. And he's like, well, I'm going to be spending money. Is there anything like newer that can play this? And I was like, well, I mean, there's like a PSP version of the game. You can download that on the PS3, I think. He's like, all right, anything else? I'm like, yeah, technically you can get on the PS5. So he bought a PlayStation 5 specifically to play Harvest Moon Back to Nature.
Wow. That's
for
awesome.
The PS1.
That's funny.
That's the only game I think he still has for it.
That's so funny. How do I play exactly this game? Okay, what if I went about it in the craziest way possible?
Oh, man. But yeah, okay. So my next hidden gem is a much newer game than what we've been talking about up to this point, and that is Sunset Overdrive for the Xbox One. So this is a game that was one of the like few Hallmark exclusive games for the Xbox One. And it's not even exclusive anymore because there's a PC port now. But one thing that this game does very well is, well, I guess just it's made by Insomniac, right? And so you can kind of get to like Spider-Man PS4, Spider-Man 2, all that stuff with a super fun traversal, a really nice open world that's not like too big, but it's fun to explore. There's stuff in it. That type of like design philosophy like kind of started here. Maybe not started here, but existed here and was then carried forward. So you are this character that exists in like a post-apocalyptic world, and it's like not even that post-apocalyptic. It's just like a little bit in the future, and there's like an evil corporation that didn't lab test its drink and then turned people into mutants and monsters. Like, what a ridiculous thing.
I love it though.
I love it. So evil company didn't pass its FDA tests basically. And so now everybody is monsters. And so that's just kind of it. You're in an open world. There's monsters all over the place, but this one is very like cartoony as well. Very obviously takes inspiration from things like Jet Set Radio. The traversal is very fun. And that's the thing that I look for the most in open world games, because if you're not having fun moving, well, I'm not going to have a fun time with these games, because as has been established many times, open world games, not really my cup of tea, because a lot of it is just kind of going to the next place. But if I'm having a fun time doing that, well then suddenly now we're talking a heck of a lot more. So this game like very much incentivizes you to stay off the ground, stay in the air, like wall run, jump off of things, grind on rails and stuff. There's a little bit like Tony Hawk DNA in here as well, where you're trying to like combo stuff together, and you get like more rewards if you stay off the ground. And not only that, like you are super incentivized to stay off the ground, because if you get mobbed by enemies, like they can kill you fast, which means, hey, well, I'm going to move really fast and stay away from these guys if at all possible. So I think that this game does the open world thing a lot better than I think a lot of other open worlds that I've played. Again, specifically because I like the traversal, but the theming of everything is really fun. The characters are fun. There's a ton of customization. Just overall, I think it is a game that people have kind of forgotten about because the Xbox One and its release and early on in its generation is like so far in the past that people are just kind of past it.
Seems sick. It's on my hidden gems list in that it's a game that I'm aware that I should play, that I know is really good, but I know not a lot of people have played it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of like really good inspiration from a lot of really good games and just makes a really solid experience out of it. Again, not my favorite game in the world, but it's pretty darn fun.
Sounds pretty good to me. I guess I'll have to put it in the queue.
It's cheap too. Like, it's an Xbox One game. Xbox One games are dirt cheap.
I know. I'm always amazed by how cheap they are.
Start collecting for Xbox One. Xbox One stuff is so cheap. You can buy brand new games for like $5. It's great.
Why are they so cheap?
A little bit of a side tangent here, but primarily because you can get them on PS4, and PS4 tends to be a little bit better. There's more people that want the PS4 copies of things. The Xbox is a very strange platform in that starting like 2016 forward, then the Xbox version becomes more desirable because you want like the Xbox One X version of things, because usually then developers started putting things in that had that was built for that. It could have higher frame rates, higher resolutions, yada yada. So it's a big complicated mess, but the point being, just nobody really wants them, but they're great games.
I guess I'll have to pick some of them up for my Xbox One that I do not utilize all that often.
Yeah.
I suppose we should go on to my final game here, Murph, and that is... Well, I don't actually have a final one. I just wanted to say that I think... to get in my quota of referencing this game every single dang episode, I think that like Chibi Robo is maybe a game that used to be considerable as a hidden gem. However, it seems to be like much more popular now than it used to be because, well, the game is weird and the game is good. It didn't sell well at all upon release, which is part of the reason why the game is now expensive, because there's just not that many copies of it out there and readily available. But I think Chibi Robo has kind of evolved out of maybe the hidden gem category, maybe like some of the games I also talked about too. Maybe now it's a bit more of a cult classic, but I wanted to use Chibi Robo as a kind of jumping off point to a small addendum to the conversation of our discussion of our favorite hidden gem video games. And that is like, are we going to see very many hidden gems going forward? Are hidden gems going to slowly evaporate under the weight of several things that I'm going to lay out here? Number one, the pool of older video games that existed before the modern era of video game content, and how easy it was and is now to discover video games that are like for you in your established niches and all this kind of stuff. The pool of video games that existed before this modern age of video games that we're in, which seem much less likely to create hidden gems, and I'll get to why in a second, is finite. Like the pool of games we have before, I'll say, it feels like beginning of 7th generation is kind of maybe where the product heavy era of video games, the physical heavy era of video games. There is a finite pool of these games that you can evaluate and talk about and play and think of potentially as a hidden gem. I say that there's a finite pool of them because many games that release these days, are very successful at finding their audiences, for several reasons. Number one, marketing. We're way better at marketing things than we used to be. The internet and all of its algorithms are really good at showing you, like the dedicated audience of a game. They're very good at showing that potential dedicated audience that game. Online marketplaces make it very easy to find stuff that you specifically would be interested in. And so, more and more games that are notable or that have sneakily really good gameplay that may have been a little bit out of the loop, it's a lot easier for those games to catch on and find an audience because there's, internet communities that talk about specific genres and, even to use a very modern game example, Balatro is probably an indie game that very well could have, been played by a few people and they're like, cool, I enjoy this deck building roguelike and I'm going to move on with my life. But because of, the power of Twitter and Reddit and related, this small indie game got boosted into a very popular Game of the Year contender, which it very well may have been rediscovered as 10 years down the line from now, by people hearkening it as a hidden gem. But besides that one point, like, game discoverability is way easier now. The second point, it feels like the single A and double A, like, market of video games has really dried up.
Yeah. Basically everything it's
like AAA or indie now.
Yes.
Those are the two markets that exist now.
And AAAs have gotten like so expensive to make that very rarely do things go under the radar.
Yeah, they very publicly succeed or flop.
Exactly. And we have seen plenty of both in the past, I would say decade or so, is when this has started to become a little bit more of a thing. One thing that I find interesting within this past decade as well is that hidden gems are a lot more difficult to parse when games are constantly updated and changed. Because
definitely.
The games, like when they release, could stink. They could be terrible. Like Cyberpunk is the famous one where it was just so not good. Like, people could barely play it, glitches rampant, and most people did not have a good time playing it. But now, basically everybody I've talked to who's played it since then have been like, oh yeah, this game's excellent.
Yeah,
it's really
Cyberpunk 2.0 rocked.
So is this really a hidden gem?
Yeah.
Kinda, not really. At least I wouldn't put it underneath something like that. But that is just kind of the case for a lot of games these days. Like, they come out, they have problems, people sweep them under the rug, and then eventually either the developer just ditches them and they never become good, or the developer starts putting out patches and stuff, adds more content. Halo Infinite is another one where it's like, yeah, this game had like no content, had good ideas, but man, oh man, do I wish there was a lot more. Well, now there's a lot more. So the game is way better.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. So many games now, if they aren't allowed to immediately flop and abandoned, then there's a lot of potential there for them to just be fixed up and move on with their merry life. I wanted to make one more example of, I think, a game that, like, just because of the modern landscape that we're in these days, may have, I think, like, in a different world, if this game was released on the Wii, on the GameCube, on the PS2, a similar thing. Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope.
That's interesting.
Tactical RPG game. A sequel to a shockingly, maybe not even Sparks of Hope, the first Mario and Rabbids game. A weird game published by Nintendo, sure, but feels like a game that very easily could have fell through the cracks. Mario and the Rabbids are in an XCOM game. Well, that's weird. And then, maybe the good reviews could have come out and it would have been picked up by a few people and they're like, wow, this is nice. And then a decade later, we all realize that it's really good or whatever, right? It feels like a game that, without the modern apparatus we have around video games, very easily could have fallen into that hidden gem status. And now it's just like, yeah, a lot of people happen to own that game because it was lauded widely by, fans and people alike to a very wide, with a very loud megaphone, that the game was actually good, even though you think it might be weird. But I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I do definitely feel like the advent of the internet has made it, and I guess not just the advent of the internet, but internet in its like super evolved form of how it currently exists, has made it so that it is just very easy to find out information about any game, right? If you're like hidden gems for Xbox 360, you can just Google that, and you'll find a ton of stuff that you might not have heard of before. But even stuff like that, like I do think that we will continue to see hidden gems. One, because there is still a ton of games that exist. Like, even if people stopped making games today, we never saw another game made. There's still plenty of stuff that people can play, have fun with, talk about, and it'll be a while before we run out of stuff to talk about. And even so, I do think that more modern games will, like, sometimes just fall through the cracks. Like, they just do, because the modern landscape, the way that we kind of function nowadays is that, a new thing comes out, awesome, play it for a week, all right, on to the next thing,
and the next thing.
Dropped like a hot potato. It's out of the zeitgeist, out of people's thoughts and minds. Things get dropped so quickly that I do feel like there will be say a game or two that comes out now that in like 5-10 years people will be like, hey, wait, no, that was actually really good, why didn't we pay more attention? Like, I'm confident that there will be multiple games like that. So
I'm sure there will be. But I think in older video games, I think they may very well disappear under the crush of content such as this, continually digging up the next hidden gem that you absolutely have to play. All right, Murph, I think that's basically all that we have to say about hidden gems. So why don't we move on to our one recurring segment of the show, our recent pickups. Have you bought video games?
Yes. In fact, I bought the same game twice because of how much I was excited for this.
Boo.
Yeah, I'm kidding. I bought a new game.
Woo!
Wahoo! I'm a consumer of new games sometimes. My recent pickup was Sonic Cross Shadow Generations. And I bought it for the Switch, and I bought it for the Xbox. I bought it for the Switch because I bought it for the Xbox initially, and then I went out of town, and I was like, crap, I really want to play this. So I just bought it for the Switch. Yeah. It was only $50, too. It's not even a full-price game, which is really sweet. You get the full Sonic Generations experience with some touch-ups, and you also get a full extra campaign with Shadow, which I didn't expect. I thought it was just going to be like maybe a couple levels or something, but no, it's like a full 4 to 5 hour experience. The closest thing I can compare it with is like Bowser's Fury, I would say.
Yeah, where it's like an existing game that they have ported forward to the future and also added on like another pack-in almost.
Yeah, except it does a few things differently. One, it is not the same game. It uses their like newest proprietary engine.
Interesting.
That runs differently. It has different like graphic settings and stuff. That's how you can tell. That like out of the gates, it runs at 30 frames per second, whereas on Sonic Generations, the remaster in the collection, it runs at 60. You have to go in and change some settings to get it to run at 60 for the Shadow Generations portion, that is. But yeah, it looks way better. It's just kind of a ton of fun. Like, you started off and I wasn't expecting much, and it is just a spectacle. Like, Sonic Team has really like hammered home how to do spectacle, which one is always appreciated in a Sonic the Hedgehog game. The music is great, but I think the thing that surprised me the most was the polish. Because like Sonic Team, I love them to death. Polish is not their strong suit. They are good at coming up with ideas and throwing ideas at the wall. Does it work? Great. Let's do something else next time. So
classic. Come on, guys, just lock it in.
Classic Sonic Team. And so this one like takes the boost formula that they've been jumping in and out of since Unleashed, and they like push it pretty far. And it feels like the levels are complex in a way that like Forces wasn't. It feels like they have depth, they have replayability. The stages, I think, because I think we were talking about this, where one of the biggest issues that people have with Sonic games, especially with boost gameplay, is that they're meant to be replayed. And so the first time you go through them, it's a lot of clunk. It's a lot of running into enemies, hitting walls, stuff like that, flying off the map, because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know where you're going. And I think that this game does a really, really good job at making your first playthrough fun. But then your second playthrough, you find a different route. And then your third playthrough, you find a different route, but then you also can like jump over this area and do another skip, and so on and so forth. So the flow is already good and it just gets better. which I don't think I've seen a Sonic game ever like stick the landing on.
But did they in this one?
They did. They really did. The one thing that I do not like about this game is there's one power-up that is not intuitive, and I had to look up how it worked. Mm-hmm. Other than that, it's like really fun. I haven't had this much with a Sonic game since
the last Sonic game.
Probably Mania.
Yeah, nice.
No, I like Frontiers, but I would say that this game is better. The Shadow Generations portion, that is actually Sonic Generations as well, is better than Frontiers.
Well, I'm glad that you have been enjoying yourself. Seems like a pretty fun pickup.
Yeah, I was gonna play it regardless, but basically everything I've seen online like kind of agrees with me, and it's like, this is good. You have
been very pleasantly surprised rather than just being a Sonic fan, checking in for what will hopefully be another like 7.5 Sonic experience with some Sonic flair on top.
Sonic's had a rough transition to 3D. The classic line.
Fair enough. All right, I suppose I can talk about my recent pickup. It is pretty small, but pretty cool. I've actually already made a short about this. You may have seen it. But I recently bought my 100th GameCube game. I wanted to make it a quote-unquote special one, but I can't spend a ton of money on games right now. I was popping around my local game store recently, and I didn't really mention this. I didn't really get into this that much earlier when I was talking about A Wonderful Life, but Wonderful Life, just when I was younger, was just one of my favorite games that I really have enjoyed playing. I've played it a ton. And I was at the game store, and I saw that they had Harvest Moon, Another Wonderful Life.
What a name.
For sale.
So what's different about this game versus...
It is literally gender bent A Wonderful Life. A Wonderful Life, you play a male character, and in Another Wonderful... you play a male character and can marry three suitable, three women suitors, and in Another Wonderful Life, you are a girl, and it swaps your romance options to three of the boys.
I feel like they should have just had that at the beginning as an option.
I would agree with you, but this was released in the United States in 2004, so that would have been a little ahead of its time, I think. But Another Wonderful Life, it is pretty much just A Wonderful Life, except you are a girl and you can get a husband rather than being a boy and you can get a wife.
So all the good things you said about Harvest Moon and Wonderful Life also applies to this one.
Pretty much applies to this one. I wish that it also had the special content from the PS2 game, because it does not.
That's weird.
Even though I believe it released after said PS2 game. Go figure. But hey, so yes, this is my recent pickup. It is my 100th GameCube game, and it is very funny to effectively have a second copy of a game that I love a lot.
They even just look similar. Even the covers just look so similar.
Yep, exactly. They're there. Let's put them on camera. They're together there.
They look the same. You go back a little bit and squints. They look the same.
Yeah, exactly. So... It is also very funny that they both say only for Nintendo GameCube, because that's like only technically correct, since they made a game with a different title that had more content with it for the PS2.
Yeah.
It was literally called like Harvest Moon on A Wonderful Life Special or something dumb like that.
That definitely did happen with the GameCube a couple of times, where you're like, it's definitely not still only on GameCube.
But hey, Harvest Moon, Another Wonderful Life, this is a game for only the Nintendo GameCube.
Nice. So now you have 100 GameCube games. How does that feel?
Oh man, feels like I am happy gaming.
Yep. Well, thanks all for watching / listening. Happy gaming.